the other thing I want to talk about is cracking some peppercorns. And this is something that it's not really a gray area. A lot of chefs that use peppercorns in recipes, in whole form feel that you don't get the full flavor of them, so cracking it is better, and that's fine. Cracked pepper is sometimes a nice texture, a nice seasoning on the outside of big hunks of meat. And so for cracking peppercorns, real easy technique. One of the things that you wouldn't know by looking at these is, as a school, we roast all our peppercorns that we're going to use for pepper mills and those types of things. And that roasting brings the oil out. You roast it for maybe 7 or 10 minutes in a 350-degree oven. You'll smell it. You'll hear it start to pop, almost like popcorn popping, even though it doesn't pop that way. But in that case, you're starting to release the oil and it'll become more aromatic. But just a nice thin layer, just a little omelet pan or saute pan. And what you're going to do is you're going to rock on the tip of the pan. So we're just going to rock forward, working from away from me, closer to me. And then this is a real coarse black pepper. Usually, and I have hand-cracked tubs of pepper at a time. So my rule of thumb, because I've done it a bunch, is usually about 3 times through. So that was once. I'm going to do it 2 more times. And that means that you're going to get a coarse texture, but not a big hunk. Anybody ever bit into a big hunk of peppercorn? It lights you on fire. Pretty much ruin your palate for everything else that you're going to eat. So. Thank you. So that's twice.
So this is basically in lieu of grinding it?
Yeah, if you're looking for like a coarse cracked pepper to finish some vegetables or anything else, crack it by hand. And I'll leave it spread out on the cutting board here, but you can see there's a good texture in terms of you can see the big flecks of pepper, but there's not any big hunks here. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, and that's why I went through it a couple times, just to try to avoid any of those big hunks of pepper as a part of that. This overview is going to cover some of the techniques and some of the terminology we use a lot of times in these knife cuts. So first and foremost, let's look at the mushrooms. How many like mushrooms? Name that one for me. Portobello. What'd you say? Okay, portobello. That'd be a big shiitake. I'd love to see that. But this is a portobello. Portobello is a very popular mushroom nowadays. And let's talk about it a minute. This is a fully open mushroom cap. This being much smaller, where the mushroom cap hasn't opened like this, is now being marketed as a baby portobello, but also is called a cremini. And the cremini mushroom was the original form of it. When they got really old and opened up, there was no marketplace for it, started marketing it as portobello. People go, wow, I like that. If you like mushrooms. If you don't like it, you probably wouldn't. But anyway, so this is a really nice mushroom to use. The only thing that's a thing that we don't want to use here is the stem. The stem's very woody. We could use this in a broth or stock, has a lot of flavor, make sure it's cleaned up, but it's very woody and we want to use it. So you could just kind of peel it out, and then you're done with that. Some chefs like to take the gills out, so if we were wanting to put this in a cream sauce, these gills are going to turn that brown. So taking the gills out will prevent that. Some people don't like the flavor. I say if it's brown anyway, might as well put the gills in it. I like mushrooms, not going to offend me. But you just take a spoon, scrape out the gills. You just got to begin in that whole kind of developing your own opinion. You have to think about what you're going to do with it at the end of the day. Cream sauce, scrape the gills out. Going into a mixed sauteed mushroom, keep them in, especially if you like mushrooms. So that's our portobello mushroom. All right, now Tori, it's your turn. Shiitake mushrooms. And shiitake mushrooms are, again, a very available, plentiful mushroom. The stems here are also very woody, and so you want to remove those. And if we were working with a whole case of shiitake mushrooms, what really helps out with that, especially for picking them up, is just a pair of scissors. You could just kind of snip them off, and that way you can let these fall into a container. Move these to another container. If we had a 3 pounds, which is a case about the size of this cutting board to trim up, that way we're using one tool for the task, and we don't have a knife we're trying to hold in our hand, our mushroom, put it on the cutting board, cut it up with the knife. So that helps out, but this could be saved for stock as well. If you only had a couple to do, you could use your paring knife, just keep it flat on the cutting board, the mushroom, cut off the stem. We could save those, and that could all go towards our stock. And you guys are going to cut some not some portobellos. You're going to cut some shiitakes next week as a part of a rice preparation. But for these, kind of similar in what we were doing with the chiffonade, or even what we were doing with the bell peppers, we can stack them up. And once we stack them up, now we can practice, using our knuckles a guide, slice right through it, and slice more than one at a time. So we have some nice, shiitake mushrooms for our dish. When it comes to the button mushrooms, a couple different ways of doing this. And again, sometimes it's how comfortable you are with your knives. Like, you could just take a slice off it so you have a little bit of a flat surface, hold it, rock on the tip of your knife. You could also guide with your knuckle and roll into it. So here I'm just making like a little chopping motion with the tip of my knife, roll the mushroom into it. Some people don't feel comfortable with a real big knife in doing that, but as long as you're pinching the handle, you wrap it around, and sometimes when I'm doing it like that, I kind of like kind of brace it up against my wrist, so it's really not going anywhere, just up and down. Some people will feel more comfortable with a little paring knife for that. But when you see I'm holding my fingers, if I slip, I'm just going to cut a big old chunk of onion. I'm not going to cut a chunk of my finger, right? So that gives us a little bit of a head start with that. Let's move this out of the area and kind of reset the area, and we'll go through a couple of the knife cuts. How many of you are really confused about cutting an onion, like you've never been able to do it well? Oh, come on, there's got to be somebody. I see the confusion all the time. How many of you like onion rings? All right, you need to put that in your mind. The only time you're ever cutting between, here's the top, here's the bottom that was the root end. The only time you're going to cut between those is if you're cutting slabs of onion, like if you're doing it for a sandwich or you're going to grill them, or if you're cutting them for onion rings. Every other cut we're going to cover today, strips, dice, you're cutting down through the top to the bottom or vice versa. And so we just want to split this in half, so just cut right through it. And the two methods we're going to use here, one we call planks and rods, like I started talking about with the shallot, and the other one's a sunburst method, and I'll diagram those for you later on. But the sunburst method kind of gets its name because, you imagine if this is round, what we're doing is we're cutting, and what we're doing is we're cutting where we're always keeping our knife pointed towards the center of the onion. So it kind of like, if it was round, it would like little rays of sunshine coming out from there. And you can even see the little stripes in the onion, and that's showing you the direction you need to cut. So in the sunburst method, holding your knife correctly, keeping your hand, out of the way of the knife, and then keeping the knife pointed in towards the center as you're slicing the onion. And you can certainly take thicker or thinner slices. Once I get about halfway through, I roll the onion. And then again, when you get down to just the nib part of it, you want to slow down. So now we have some slices, and that works out well for the sunburst method. And you can also use a similar method for making a large dice. For the planks and rods, what we'll do is planks, meaning like horizontal pieces. So we're going to cut horizontal pieces first. Then we're going to cut those into kind of like finger-like sticks. And this is the technique we use for dicing, or if we go finer, it would be for more like a brunoise. But always take it to the edge of your cutting board, because I'm trying to keep my knife, as flat as possible. And if I put it up here, my knife won't be able to stay flat because my knuckles are in the way and the handle of the knife is. So at the end, palm of your hand on top of the onion, so you're putting pressure on it. And if you slip, you're not going to cut yourself, not cut your fingers. They're out of the way. Heel the knife right where you're planning on cutting, and if your knife's sharp, you should just be able to draw it towards you and it'll cut through the onion. Your goal is not to cut all the way through, but to cut into it at least, 3/4 of the way. So that's our planks. For our rods, we're going to cut into the onion, but again, still not cut all the way through. And then we're going to turn it one last time. Some chefs prefer to leave, and this is the top end, but leave the root end in to help hold it together. I know Chef Mark likes that, but when it gets down to this point, I like to just slice the remainder of the onion into a couple slices, turn it over. Again, we're just trying to get a uniform like size here. Slice it again, and then just cut right into it, and we'll use the whole onion for that. And when we're looking for a uniform size, We do that so that it looks good on the plate, but also it'll cook at the same rate, as opposed to a big hunk and a real small piece. You'll cook at different rates. So that's our onion. And then we have some carrots we're going to cut today. Let me go through 2 cuts for that, and then I think we'll be ready to take a break. For the cuts here, we have a rondelle, which just means a round. So that would be keeping your triangular form, your knife, your carrot in this case, and your body. Yeah, and then what you're going to do, and we'll take this tip end off, but you're going to rock on the tip of your knife, yeah, and just taking little rounds. If we want to make that an angled cut or a bias cut, turn the carrot towards you, yeah, so it's parallel to your body. And now, when we're cutting, we'll naturally cut at that 45-degree angle. Yeah, and then the last cut, which we'll do with some of your carrots today, is going to be an oblique. An oblique is a rolled cut, and the definition of it is a 2-sided rolled cut. And so there could be a number of ways that's defined, but one of those is I have a 45-degree angle cut. I roll the carrot 90 degrees. So now, what was this farthest part out closest to me is going to roll up top. And I'm going to cut again at another 45-degree angle, roll it, 45-degree angle, roll it, cut. And so you end up with this kind of trapezoid, odd shape. That's an oblique. It's a rolled cut where I rolled it. It's got 2 sides to it that I cut. Another way of doing that would be to roll it, instead of 90 degrees, roll it 180 degrees where that point that was towards you goes completely away from you, and that forms a triangular cut. And that works out well for really small carrots. But you look at these 2 groups of carrots that we're cooking, we're putting out on a buffet, most people would be able to eat that in one bite. Most people wouldn't be able to eat that in one bite, or you'd be sitting there with the big old mouthful of gum, kind of, that big thing. So that's where you really have to distinguish one between the other. I've even heard some chefs in town here calling the oblique cut that's cut real small, call that a Chinese roll cut. Use that for a mixture of like stir fries and that type of thing. But just a really good all-purpose cut, especially for a banquet where you're putting out maybe a hotel pan of carrots. That works out really well for that.